So I'm joined today by Marcus Weiss, and we're here at the Frederick L. Hemke Saxophone Institute in Sydney, Maine. And thank you, Marcus, for agreeing to do an interview with me. I really appreciate it. And so part of the point of this podcast is to get the stories of many different saxophonists. I'm really fortunate that I get to work with amazing faculty at this camp, and Marcus being one of them. And so I'll let Marcus speak. Marcus, could you tell us your story, how it all began, who you studied with, and
with saxophone story, my saxophone story.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So actually, try to make it short. I wanted to become, that I realized only when I was 30, I remembered that, but so now I can tell it. When I was 9, there was this day where you go to music, we have public music schools, and there's always the one day in the year you visit and the teachers show the instruments you can try out. I remembered then, I think I was 9, I wanted to become a saxophone professor. It's really true, with 9. I don't know how, but somehow I combined probably seeing saxophones in the Glenn Miller story, in the film, and the title of professor as like the highest possible thing. I didn't know, that there's a soloist or whatever. So saxophone and professor, that was the thing it started out with. And they said there is no saxophone, you first have to learn a real instrument, which is the clarinet. That I did, and I did. I did a lot of improvisation right away, and we played, of course, a lot of classic styles, little tunes, and quartet also. Actually, when I was 12, 13, I stopped, and then I think I was, or 14, I was 15. Some moment my mother said, "But don't you remember you wanted to become a saxophone player?" And I said, "Yes, that's true." So it's a very funny story, right. Really strange story. And then I said, "Okay, yes, true, you're right, I forgot." And then I worked. I think I was 15 or going to be 16. I would work during the summer with metal. So like really, I don't know how you call that, plumber as a plumber,
plumbing,
helping plumbing. It was very hard job for 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and I earned some money and I bought my first saxophone. And then it started all out. I started to play. I found finally the instrument, and then I started to do jazz. I took jazz lessons with a bebop player, crazy Charlie Parker imitator, if you want, but who dedicated his whole life in being bebop player. And he told me after half a year, I mean, if you really want to become a saxophone player, you have to go and study with Ivan Roth, because he is a very fine teacher and you can always do jazz after. And that's how it came. And my music, my interests when I was 16, 17, 18, they were very large. I was not interested in playing an instrument. I was interested in music. I listened to a lot of different things. So it started with ragtime, and then actually jumped to Mahavishnu Orchestra, all the funky jazz, later jazz, and then back to jazz, real jazz, hard bop and everything. And I listened hours and hours to all these great tenor and alto players and really know them. I know not all of them, but I can say this is Stanley Turrentine, and this is Benny Golson, and this is Dexter Gordon. So that was my world. And on the other side, I was interested also in arts, in literature, and just about everything, and started to listen to classic music because my parents listened a lot to classical music, and my heroes were Schubert. I don't know why, maybe I read that somewhere, but I listened to Winterreise. I don't know the English name. Schubert, the Mass in B minor by Bach, and Don Giovanni by Mozart. I kind of, as if somebody would have given me the best. And I listened to that a lot, and of course to a lot of other classical music, but always parallel with jazz. And then I started my studies with Ivan Roth,
And then for the listeners, could you explain who Ivan Roth is?
So Ivan Roth is one of the few non-French students of Marcel Mühl, of the founder of the saxophone pedagogy, of how to play the classic saxophone, if there is a classic saxophone. And he did that in Paris, and I don't know how many students he had, but there were not hundreds going through his hands. And some, like Fred Hemke, did study with him. Ivan was in the class. He did the full studies. I don't know how long that was in Paris. He lived in Paris, so he was a Swiss saxophone player with a Russian mother, actually, but somehow ended up living in Paris. And he had another interesting story. He came to the saxophone because his neighbor he heard always in Paris was Sidney Bechet. And he wanted to take lessons with Sidney Bechet. And Sidney Bechet himself also told him, no, you have to go to Marcel Mühl to study at the Conservatoire. So Ivan was one of the first, not of the first hours of Mühl, of course. He was there in the 60s. But he was an interesting musician because he was more than a saxophone player. I think he was one of the first of his generation to open up his mind a little bit and play other repertoire, and not only transcription but also contemporary repertoire. He tried to bring the saxophone a little bit out of this little small world of saxophone players. And he was the only one in the German-speaking world, so he had a couple of German students and other country students. And I had the chance to live in this town in Basel, Switzerland, where he taught. So, and I then also played in his quartet for a couple of years. And then after my studies with Ivan, I think I did 5 years with him. I had a year of a break where I didn't know what I want to do, and then somehow there was this inspiration, Chicago, my big town, Fred Hemke, because Fred visited Basel, the class, a year before.
Right.
And that's how I came to Northwestern.
He visited, gave a master class.
Yes.
And then later on you had a vision.
Yeah, it's a vision. I mean, it was not some religious vision, but I was practicing there my stuff, and somehow I thought, wow, I don't know why. I was in a very old house, like in a house from 1600 and something. That was kind of original, like walls like this, and heating with wood and double window, which is probably not original, but not real double window, but like old style double window. So it was really cold, and I was practicing fast to get warm. And then there was this. It suddenly was this. It was really an inspiration. Chicago. I saw the town. I mean, I didn't know that town, but these buildings and the opposite of where I sat at that moment. So I wouldn't have gone to a campus somewhere in the Greens, somewhere in the in a rural region. It was Fred Hemke. He impressed me a lot.
Yes.
But it was also the idea of being in a city.
The city, right. And before we get into Chicago, you mentioned you did 5 years with Ivan Roth. Are there any, what were some of the biggest lessons you learned from Ivan, and how has that influenced you as a player?
From Ivan?
Yeah, some of the principles that he teaches that maybe came from Mühl and...
Yeah, I mean, Ivan was really, he was very serious. He was very like this. He was always in your back. He was never, like this. It was not a real discussion, but this. He was a little bit tough.
Right.
And I had some moments because the repertoire, I will not go too much into that, but the saxophone repertoire, already when I was a student, I was just not interested in that music. I was not. This was pedagogical repertoire. They say these are the classics of the classic saxophone, but they are only the classics for the saxophonists
Right.
when they gather in competitions, and so I was not interested. Quasi nothing of this music, except some concertos, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Ibert has its rights, and Villalobos and Martin, and of course Debussy and Schmidt, and these are, and Denisov and Albright, I think, and it's a special style, but this is really authentic somehow.
Yes.
But all this other, I don't name anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not. I prefer to do either improvise or play jazz or play good transcriptions,
Right.
where something comes to you from the score and you not only have to doodle around. So that brought some little clash with Ivan, and he told me, we just don't talk of that anymore, and we just go on and work. And I said, okay. I kind of, he didn't oppose that to me aesthetically so much, all these things, but there was a clear line, and we started to do actually many transcriptions, Baroque music and Brahms sonatas, Schumann pieces, Poulenc, I don't know, oboe sonata, Prokofiev. So and contemporary music.
Right.
So what I learned from Ivan, I think practically everything. I mean, I think he had not only an incredible technical precision, that is a Parisian thing, but also a strong musical sense. He was somehow more educated musically than most saxophonists. He also was a quite fine flute player, and he knew a lot of other repertoire. He knew music,
right.
Which I'm very happy, because there are many saxophone instructors that are perfect saxophone instructors, but in this little field again, with like the couple of 10, 20 parameters and things, this and that, and sustain, and this is like this, and then stop. And I never felt that with Ivan. He was very demanding. Many students, I think, or a couple stopped. Were kicked out somehow.
Right.
Just didn't work. Maybe also humanly, but there was this, I wouldn't say Russian school, but somehow was Russian there. Something was. And I learned a lot from Ivan. Yeah, as I say, practically everything. And Fred opened it up somehow for me.
Yes.
Because this strong concentration with Ivan makes you a little, not frightened, but it helps a lot to strengthen things. But the generosity of Fred and the musical precision also of Fred were exactly the good thing I needed, I think. I restarted to do some technique, after having done my soloist diploma. I played with orchestra in Basel. I did more or less a master's, or even a little bit more than a master's compared. And then I restarted for my 1-year master with Fred. I restarted to do technique and altissimo, because that was the time when altissimo came more into the game. So I learned also a little bit, again, technical things, but also many musical details that I didn't know I did, that Ivan didn't tell me. Ivan was not so much reflecting the conditions of what you do. He had this incredible musical instinct, or you could call it musicality.
Right.
Whereas Fred, I had the impression he has a pedagogical project somehow.
Yes.
And he doesn't want to serve you just, but he also, he puts the foot there and he makes you react, which for me was it was rather a freeing me from things, and my pedagogics, I think for myself, the most important thing that I cherish actually when I teach is to say absolutely what I hear, what I think, and what I think you shouldn't do, and do this, do that, but to always give the reason why, to show the conditions of what we do, because music is complicated. Sometimes it's a little thing, but if you look at an interpretation, at a whole text, and somebody is nowhere with it and doesn't understand the music at all, it's a long way. Right. And to create this context of not only talking about the rhythm or sound or whatever, but to create a context with the parameters, because you need many things at the same time, but it's complicated. So for me, this is important to be maybe a little bit complicated sometimes, but then people think, yeah, but they don't understand it right away. So I'm not into do this and then next week this and then, but
right.
I mean, either you're a musician and you want to be a musician, and then you need to be interested in thousands of things and to look, or you're not. And if you're not, then you will be overwhelmed by such things. But then it's your problem. Then you probably shouldn't study or just do something else. You know, I don't think everybody can be a musician. It's just like I'm not good in handcrafts things. You know, my craftsman thing is saxophone, and I'm also not interested in. I probably wouldn't understand it because I'm not really interested in understanding it.
So it sounds like Dr. Hemke broke you open by connecting the intellect with what was coming out of your horn musically.
Yes, and also somehow I think of it now, seeing him teach, just with his figure, being there with his natural authority. It's not so much, his analysis of things. He's not and he knows from teaching, I mean, hundreds of years of teaching, he knows things, and he doesn't say it right away, but he has his ways of, going at things, of course. Right. But in general, I see him just as he's good with himself, maybe, and that gives already this, and these comments are never negative. You have to do this, you must, With Ivan, it was a little bit more this kind of, if you don't do that, you're out. This kind of more, which is good too, because, you cannot always be nice with people. At a certain point, you have to push and say, and put the mirror there and just say, this sounds like not good.
Not good, exactly. So, and then when you're in Chicago, you were talking to me and Ron Blake, who's another teacher at this camp, about how you didn't spend much time on campus, but you would rehearse, you'd have your lessons, you'd practice, and then it was to the city, to the blues clubs.
Yes, of course. Not only the blues clubs, but just the streets and things. And actually, jazz, I don't know, but I have the impression there is no jazz in Chicago. Of course there is, I know. But it's not like New York. It's really... I saw a very sad concert with one of my beloved tenor players, David Murray, who is a free player, like he was one of the last, from my sense, of keeping the flame after Coltrane, of bringing jazz forward, of making jazz not just a nice virtuoso entertainment music, but was kind of an art movement thing. Art Ensemble of Chicago, of course, that was fantastic. And David Murray, I don't know how they were connected, but they knew each other. But I saw him play in this jazz club. I saw him play standards. And it was so sad because you knew he would only do it for the money. And but the blues clubs were the whole... I experienced it completely... differently, like with the bar lady singing later, and being better than the singer before on stage, or better, I don't know, but just having the same kind of. Also this in the South Side, this club, but the Checkerboard Lounge. Do you know that one?
I don't.
It's in the mid of the South. I think it's a quite well-known thing. It's a very black area. They told me, no, don't go there. And you feel a little bit strange. I felt a little bit, okay, but whatever. I'm still alive. So I heard some shots, for example.
Oh my goodness!
Arriving not far there, but I loved that a lot. I really and then there was all the rest. A lot of literature, actually, some lectures and some a lot of cinema, and yeah, just went out to town.
Great.
Have fun.
So with Iwan, we had the discontent with the regular canon of our repertoire,
Yeah.
and then see Dr. Hemke, and then after you studied in Chicago, you returned to Switzerland.
Yes.
And then how did you find yourself as an artist and find your voice and explore the repertoire that you wanted to explore?
Yeah. I was all the time through somehow, if possible, doing free improvisation.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Basel I started to connect to the new music world. I went to concerts,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember very well, that was a moment, probably also one of these moments, I heard, it's very funny, in the radio studio of Basel, which is on top of the hill, there was a hall. They tore it down. It was a beautiful studio of the 50s, all wood, these kinds of. There was a concert of the Society of New Music from Basel, where the Arditi Quartet would play. So Arditi was at that time the only string quartet playing contemporary music. I went to this concert. They played Beat Führer, which is a Swiss composer, fantastic composer, who is the founder of the Klangforum Vienna, of the probably best, or one of the 2-3 best ensembles of contemporary music in the world. And Beat, we got in contact after the concert and somehow became friends right away, very direct contact. And he told me, yeah, but come to Vienna, we have no sax players. And that was the word. I just went to Vienna. Because in Switzerland, there was a lot of at that time not so much, but things were happening. But there was nothing with saxophone. And I was always hanging out with the best players, with the flute, clarinet, cello, and pianist of the ensemble in Basel. They were playing all around, all over the place. And there was nothing ever for saxophone. I don't know, I didn't have the nerve to say we should or so. That didn't exist. They just played, their Pierrot Lunaire and their more modern things and contemporary things. And I just thought, maybe I should go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so I went there, and that was an important decision because that was the real new music. That was the avant-garde. It started from the newest Nono, Lachenmann, Feldman was played at that time. They were all still alive. I think, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think so. That was in 88 or so, 89. And at the same time, I don't know why, but there's an ensemble in Freiburg, Germany, also not far from Basel, which is a little bit the Rolls-Royce, or at that time was the Rolls-Royce of a smaller ensemble. 9 people. They're still, after 30 years, the same, more or less 2 changes, but the same people. They play without conductor, 9 instruments, all mixed. And I was called to play a piece with them at an important radio festival in Germany that only does first performances. So I met these people, and from not long after that, I think, we founded the trio a canto with the percussionist of this ensemble and with a Japanese pianist who lived in Germany. And then it started all, because we were connected to the best composers, to the also kind of important composers around, Wolfgang Riem, Helmut Lachenmann, Nikolaus Ahuber, and all these people. And we played also many of their students' pieces. So from the beginning, and I realized that this was a good decision. My idea was I don't want to play, as I did in Vienna, in a concert one piece with saxophone, and then they play the good pieces, and then you play one piece. Maybe it's a good piece, but usually there is also the Schoenberg and the whatever, the Feldman, and so, and then you play you play Miller and whoever, and it's one piece and it's okay, but it's 1 time, 2 times. So I wanted a fixed ensemble with non-saxophonists.
Yeah.
And I thought the saxophone is a strong instrument, so piano percussion, of course, has a jazz history. But we took this completely out of that, and this connection with composers, very close to composers and these festivals, was very good for us. I mean, I had the big chance to get into that scene on a quite high level right away. So we played in Donau-Eschingen, which is a little bit the Graal festival of contemporary music, where everybody was played. You know, where Cage had his piano concerto number so and so. That was the revolutionary moment in the 50s, and Nono and Boulez and Stockhausen, Berio, they were all there. And after 2 years of existing, we already had a call. I mean, they called us to play there, a recital with, of course, only first performances. It was a lot of work.
Wow.
But so I had the chance from Vienna and Freiburg to get into that scene quite quickly. But I was never interested in, as I say, in saxophone. I was interested in bringing the saxophone into that.
Right.
But not in a saxophonistic logic, always in the logic of how can I blend, what do I see in the other instruments, how can I make my instrument compatible to that, to bring it to that level somehow of the other instruments. So I had a lot of chance with that. And then in Klangforum, of course, the ensemble was young and fresh, and we were doing incredible projects in the 90s. And they still play just fantastic. It's really good.
And it's strange, it's almost subconsciously with trio Acanto. It almost looks like a small jazz combo.
Yeah.
And so you're feeding this part of from your childhood almost.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, it's just subconsciously. I thought that was interesting.
It's funny, it's true. But I also thought, very stupidly, I mean, it came together because I was playing with the pianist, and we were on a trip back from a concert, and in some bar at the station before, have a little drink before we'd separate, and it was, let's do something together, chamber music. It would be nice, so we can build up something. Yeah. So we were saxophone and piano, and what would you put with that? Of course, you can put a cello, which I like a lot, but and it's cheaper also, no transport, no instruments, no all that.
Right.
But I think the percussion just can play the same forte and the same fortissimo. On the cello, you always have the problem of the balance with the saxophone and with the piano, of course. And I also thought, it's melody, harmony, and rhythm. It's of course very stupid because contemporary music is all the other way around, and composers did have a lot of problems writing for us because really contemporary, it's always difficult to say what is real, there are different worlds and everything, but people that don't write melodic lines, rhetoric music, I hear a lot of new music here that is not new music, that is good music, whatever, but it's still thought like music was always, it's a flow, it has a harmony and a rhythm and maybe a metronome or not, but it's somehow post romantic or classic music. Right. Whereas the boys in the 50s, Stockhausen, Boulez, Nono, they brought a new, after Webern, after Schoenberg, they brought a new paradigm into the game where music becomes much more either structural or sculptural or installative, and the player is not the soloist, is not the voice, and you don't have a storyline in the piece and so forth, but it's contemporary music. So composers have the problem, they cannot write some chords for the piano and some beat for the percussion and some melody for the saxophone, but most of them, like especially of course in Germany in the 80s, 90s, were looking for extreme like bring the instruments to a common sound world, let's say, like look for the percussive sounds of the saxophone and for the melodic things in the percussion, and to build a higher unity, let's say, of the three, and not just write sax phrases for the sax and piano phrases for the piano. And many of them, of course, went very far in that. So you would have to learn your instrument new for a new piece. Yeah, right. I had some of these pieces played, and that can be quite demanding. And getting older also. Yeah, you already see. I don't judge this is a good piece or a bad piece, but for myself, of course, I have to judge. I know, I see the score and see, yeah, okay, maybe it will sound, but I know already that it will not bring anything new. It's just a remake of something. But then invest 3 times 10 hours of practicing to get it together. I mean, at my point now, I was on the Himalaya with one piece, with the Giorgio Netti soprano saxophone piece, the 70-minute...
70 minutes.
70 minutes of multiphonics, but very beautifully made. I mean, it's incredibly composed. You wouldn't believe the material. He brings up the thought and classification of things and structuring of things before he even starts to write the piece.
Right.
It doesn't sound like that. It sounds natural because he invents this world. But you have to invent your instrument new, and most of the sounds don't work with the fingering. They only work when you hear it and when you exactly know the position. So, yeah, you have to get...
Reinventing the technique to inhabit this sound world, and you just have to become that piece.
Yeah, and that's of course a lot. And if this happens with every piece, you have a lot of work. Of course, you expand your possibilities and especially your hearing, which is great. After having played this piece, when I improvise on the soprano, I cannot play, or I'm not interested in playing one note. Maybe sometimes, of course, I do, but I think not 2-dimensional, but 3-dimensional somehow. It's a sound. It brought up that thing that a note is a sound and not a tone. Mm-hmm. You know, when you play, let's say, bebop, then you play tones one after the other. Right. Or most classic music, it's tones. Of course, there is an arpeggio and there is a sound with it. But if you get into the spectral quality of sounds, like with multiphonics, which are kind of spectra, then you don't play a monotonic instrument anymore. But you every note is a sound. Mm-hmm. So especially in free improvisation, this would interest me much more. And I hear something else when I play a low F. I don't hear a low boo, just the note on the piano, but I hear a sound. I hear the inside of somehow the components of the colors of the sound. Many musicians do that, of course. I don't want to say you have to go through this, but this kind of musical practice opens your listening a lot, and that's the advantage. But otherwise, it was a lot of work. I suffered.
Right, and it's funny seeing you work with students. You almost disregard how difficult it is. You're just chasing a sound, and you say, you know, do something different with your embouchure when you're working on with a student on subtone. You know, don't be so rigid and in this one technique for everything. You're just you're serving the sound, you're serving the gesture. Yeah. And of course the music.
Yeah, I mean, in teaching, I realized that many students, I mean, it's just a problem. It's so difficult. The stuff that we play often is very difficult and demanding. And to get the technical things done is one thing, but then to bring it into a larger context is another thing. And I think we should not just do first technique and then start to think about it. But I try, at least, as sometimes it works, sometimes not, but with students to have a more holistic approach. Yes. Because sometimes it's really, you just have to find out where to do movement, and then the whole picture changes. That, of course, this magic moment doesn't happen so often, but I still believe in that. I still believe if some of the parameters are done the right way, then the whole picture that is blurred becomes clear. That's why I insist with all these neoclassic and neo-romantic pieces played here. Yes. I insist very much that we rediscover, or saxophonists rediscover, metrics. They have no idea of metrics, zero, because it's not learned, it's not taught. Metric, when it goes about, you have to phrase, you have to find your way. No, it's not your way. It's in the score. It's in the music. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and then we have the periods. And if you look at the metrics plus the periods, and you know what you have to count, it's very technical.
Right.
And then you can give somebody, if I count half tempo, maybe there's more music. This morning we had it with the Haydn sonata, counting the counting per measure. This person was doing 2 in 2/4, like what is in 2. And you don't need to count 2. If you count, then your counter pulse becomes a counter pulse. If you count in a 1-2 measure, it's just going like that. This is a very simple, because it's the most simple possible rhythm there is a 2/4. This is a 2/4. It's written as a 4/4, but it's actually a 2/4 because we don't count the quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. You cannot count that. Right. But there you should count the measure, and then you already have a structural thing that structures your phrasing, your dynamics, your direction, the way to give weight on the upbeat and on the downbeat and these kind of things. Same thing. No, let's not go into saxophone repertoire. But but I hear this music played like as if what is written is the whole music. Like if there are triplets in a measure, dee da 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 dee da da dee da da da, but it's dee da da dee da dee dee da da dee. Right. You have to find the music there. It's not written, but that doesn't mean that it's only subjective. And of course, you have to find it yourself. Right. But there are means to find it that are not complicated. It's just a musical context. Of course, that's why I say that the metrics. I learned a lot from Baroque people, and Baroque phrasing, Baroque articulation is of course not the same as a Romantic articulation, but it's always rooted in a dance or whatever, in a corporal feeling, in a heavy light movement. And the speaking quality, like the articulation of the notes, relate to the 1, 3, to that, and they go against it. So the whole, if you can free your body and have this feeling there, and you can relate your phrasing, relate it to the, go against, have a subtext, or the let's say that the metrics are the subtext and you're kind of dancing on top of that. Then your phrasing will be, I would say, natural. It's not natural because music is not natural, but the phrasing gets the good groove, and the groove comes from the microdynamics that come from the phrasing. So the phrasing comes from the rhythm. It's all one. And I think, of course, that's not an explanation of Baroque music, but that brought a lot, because this is still alive in any kind of metrical music, all these things. Of course, when you have Romantic music, you have more the sostenuto, but sostenuto, like saxophone players do, just, machine on, and then just play like kind of wood carved music is that for me. It's a little bit stiff, and the repertoire doesn't help, but I think there's more to do even with that music.
And it's liberating for musicians because there's so little that we can control and so much that we think is subjective. But when you start to put parameters around it, context, and it just informs your musicianship. So it's not just spilling out of you. There's a logic behind it.
And especially what I think the most important concept, and that will be an interesting work to be done. Of course, that's what I do my whole life long, but is the word context. Because what I said now, the context of metrics, heavy light relations that go in the Baroque music, they go through the whole movement usually. There is no change like in a classic movement where you have opposite characters and half time, double time, whatever. But in a Baroque music, it's like in minimal music. You have like an allemande. It looks like minimal actually.
Yeah.
You know, from the beginning to the end.
Right.
But inside that, the relationship of the heavy light with the phrasing, with the tempo you choose, with the instrument you have, these are objective things. So, and they are interrelated. And of course you can overdo something, but we quickly hear that if you take this and this tempo and you a slow tempo and then you start to make accents, then something in the relationship, in the context is not right.
Right.
And I'm interested in that context thing a lot, because you can even implement the individual into that. It doesn't mean that you can find the formula of the interpretation of somebody if you have his tempo, his blood type or whatever. But somehow there are, you know, more flat versions and more full versions, but you can always describe them with musical technical things. Somebody is doing less rhythmic but more a horizontal interpretation, and then you can judge if this is good, if the music wants that or not. So I think there is much more objectivity than we think. Even though there are the counterexample that I always bring, everybody uses is Glenn Gould.
Right.
But he is not the counterexample. He is so coherent. He's just an extreme choice. Of course, if you are historically aware today of Baroque music interpretation, you have to decide in your mind, yeah, Glenn Gould is great. Glenn Gould was great, because everything is about wrong in terms of Baroque interpretation, what he's doing. Right. I mean, not everything, of course,
right.
But it was such a great playing. But the context, again, the coherence of what he does is given. It's just a little bit extreme in certain, it just goes through it, but it has such a power.
There's a thread through all the musicians and music that you appreciate. You seem to appreciate authenticity.
Absolutely.
Right.
I don't see a reason for anything else.
Anything else? Why waste your time with anything else?
No, I mean, I'm not interested in having, that's a nice piece. I don't like a nice piece. I'm just not interested.
Right.
It has to be authentic, and I don't know. In art, I think that's at least it's a very Western, I know it's a very Western attitude, you know, the uniqueness of something. Authenticity is I mean, it's the uniqueness in terms of authentic means it's exactly from this person, and the reason why are perfectly given and fit. So it has something unique also. So not for the for the sake of being unique. So it's not like new music. You look for something new in order to be new, but you just you want to break with it. You want to hear something new, not because of the new, but you want to go on, and there's this authenticity or uniqueness is also in there. But I know, like, I have many musics that I love, and now I have the chance, also again an incredible chance. We have the Schola Cantorum at my school in Basel is kind of one of the world best Schola Cantorums. It's one of the oldest, like old music school, but all the great people of the first movement were teacher there, and it's still a very, very good school, and they have great teachers, and one of the medieval singers, Dominique Vellard, is a good friend of mine, and he's quite open. He's not like, no, you do yours, I do mine. No, he's absolutely open. And now we have a duo project doing Josquin, Machot, and Spanish and South French folkloric music with 2 saxophones and 2 singers, 2 tenors.
Wow.
And you cannot believe how much I learned from them. I mean, they are the best singers of old music. It's an ensemble called Gilles Binchois. They do a Machot mass. It's fantastic. It's completely the opposite of the Hilliard ensemble in terms of interpretation. Right. Hilliard is beautiful. It's clean and everything, and they really go at it. It's much more corporal and Why do I say that? Yeah, because of my musical choices. It's again, it's just Macho and Josquin and Lasso. The best of them is the best there is. So why not go with that? Why play whatever mediocre things?
Yeah.
We do, for example, a program with my quartet now. Pierre Stéphane, our friend in the quartet, saxophone quartet. That's another thing.
Could you introduce Zasax for the
Yes,
listeners? Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the third thing
Right.
I have. Besides doing this and that,
Right.
I have the teaching, the trio, and Zasax. And Zasax is a saxophone quartet we started actually in Vienna as a trio because we didn't want to do quartet.
No.
Everybody does quartet. We did 2 or 3 concerts with new music in Vienna actually, and then finally decided maybe it would be intelligent to do a quartet. And then we Serge Bertocchi, French saxophone player, and he brought a friend, Jean-Michel Goury. We had lunch at a Vietnamese restaurant in Paris, and then we went and played a little, and then it was a quartet from then on. And we did a lot of contemporary music. We were not very good businessmen, like checking all the time. Everybody was doing other things, but we did a lot of new music. I think we did play. I don't know if the Rushers who commissioned Xenakis and Donatoni, if they did play these pieces so much at that time. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we played these pieces thanks to their commission. We played, these were our first pieces. And also the cage that John Sampen,
of course,
ordered. And we commissioned many pieces, also a couple of pieces from not so classical composers. Like the Alex Bues Swiss piece, Victor Batten, very rough piece.
Right.
Elliot Sharp wrote a piece for us with 4 soprano saxophones. I don't know if you know Elliot.
I don't know.
He is a fantastic New York musician from the free noise scene. Actually playing the soprano himself, but also bass with electric bass with hundreds of little pedals.
Yeah.
He was playing with John Zorn and Fred Frith and all these people in the 90s. So we have many pieces, and more and more we also we had a need to play other music. So in the beginning of the 2000s, Sciarrino made an incredible contribution to the saxophone repertoire that most saxophonists, of course, don't know yet.
Yeah.
Because like Karg Ehlert was ignored for 80 years. And Schulhoff, nobody knew about Schulhoff, but everybody played all these competition pieces. So Sciarrino wrote a whole transcription series with Scarlatti sonatas, and then the mixed, the Pagine, I don't know if you know that one. And so that brought us to make a CD and so on. So we developed a lot of transcription, but I always tried not to just transcribe nice pieces and to have a nice program with nice pieces, but connecting programs, trying to make. So, for example, now we do a lot of the art of the fugue, Kunst der Fuge. We do like most of it, everything possible with 4 voices, and Schumann fugues to it, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
The latest program we have, which is my absolute, I'm happy to do that as much as possible, as often as possible, is a full program with only Janacek pieces. So piano piece transcription, but very well, it's more than transcribed. And that's a lot of work, because there you need to learn this rubato, I mean, you need to learn to play it free, but in an intelligent way. And there is a whole tradition of that again we don't have.
Right.
We read 8 notes, but it's you go with the meter, you go with the harmony, you go with the other voice. There's so much to learn, and that's fantastic. And that at the moment, this is our kind of thing. So we do very eclectic programs with contemporary and short pieces, entering with a canon of Orlando Di Lasso, walking into the hall and then playing a strange piece with 4 alto saxophones and harmonicas, a contemporary piece, and playing Schumann fugues, and all kinds of things. So So that's a little bit the Xasax world.
Wow.
That has developed for us in a good direction, because now we found a way to play classic music, but not the kind of, you know, not for pleasing the audience or for selling concerts. It's really a musical interest. Of course, we want to please the audience, but But yeah, we don't play at marriages or things like that. Mm-hmm. It's not this kind of ensemble. It's really more this very, very pushed chamber music idea of trying to be on the level like a string quartet, of really working out an interpretation of things. And yeah, and it's nice. We are still the same four guys since 26 years now. It's really getting also older.
Yeah. So you're not always just pushing the envelope with the new music. You're really just pushing yourself musically.
Yeah, it's the new music. Actually, I must say, with the trio, we have made, I think, about 90 first performances of real commissions, you know, pieces from 10 to 20 minutes that were, most of them, a lot of work, and so 90 times. And then I played a couple of solo pieces, as I said before, that were really difficult.
Yes.
And there's kind of a natural, it's not a disinterest, but I don't want to learn new pieces again and again and again of this kind. I can also not, I don't get back into a modern repertoire. It doesn't interest me. I accept that the saxophone has this repertoire. A large part is not for me. Certain pieces I'm happy to play of the quartet and the solo repertoire. With piano, I don't see so many. And so I'm looking more in mixing things, like we are mixing a lot, of course, and it's not difficult. It's difficult to sell that. I mean, of course, we don't live from that. Right. No, none of us. But we want the quality, and we want this kind of human project of really going into music, because we have. That's a good thing about the quartet. We really have a sound. We really have our sound. And we have our phrasing. With certain pieces, we were working so hard to have the same staccato, to be aware of how we play and how we sound, that with the time, this produces a unity where it's always important to degrease the sound of any saxophone quartet. It's always, but with phrasing, you can do a lot already. Not, you know, pump the air and everybody plays his part, but really try to play like a quartet. And but that takes a lot of time, and I'm happy we have that, even though we still have inner fights. There are two duos not fights, but there are really two duos in the quartet.
What are the two duos?
No, two and two. We are 2 and 2 persons. That,
right. Who's on your side then?
Yeah, I mean, it's with Pierre Stéphane. I think we are a little bit a duo. We also are a duo.
Oh, okay.
We have become, after 25 years, we wanted always to do a duo, so now we do. And Serge and Jean-Michel a little bit, and it's fun. It's always at the end. It's not a compromise, but it needs it. It's good. It's good to have both. It's not like, you know, like this and one duo always wins. But it's constantly, for certain things we need their comment, and then for certain things they need our comment, and so it's a fun situation. Great.
Let me just check the time. So, I guess last question.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again. In your ideal world, what would happen what would need to happen in the saxophone community or with music to, you know, help the next generation of saxophonists? Because there's just so many students, so many. What would be your advice to anybody?
More music.
More music.
No, I don't know. It's difficult. We really work with all these difficult pieces that are not worth playing. and that's like a little bit a Don Quixote moment, you know. I see that a lot, and I see the community also reproducing itself, you know, like all these people there, all the colleagues that do this congress and competition thing, they reproduce this kind of thinking.
Right.
And I feel actually a lot, I feel many, especially also from the United States, many interesting musicians, saxophone players that don't want this anymore, that see the kind of, they see the limits of this repertoire, because it's all about repertoire.
Yes.
You know, if you have to play Beethoven, then million people come and they do and the best will win. You know, but if you have to play whatever, Miller, Meyer, or then only those that are interested in that, the best somehow wins. But it's a little world.
Right.
So I just hope that this kind of saxophone community becomes more diversified.
Yes.
And that's what I feel what is happening.
Yes.
But otherwise, I think it's a natural process of, it's like I see a very Hegelian kind of thing, you know, like of coming to yourself, of becoming yourself, the thought that becomes, that first there is the chef and everybody does like the chef, and then there are 2 or 3 chefs, it becomes more democratic. And then somehow the instrument is ripe to be given to the world. And I think that was, I don't know, somehow in the 80s or before, where there was not only the French school,
right.
And there was not only, you know, Muhl and De Fayet. Muhl did not much for the repertoire, and De Fayet did nothing for the repertoire.
Right.
They were just interested in having well-played instrument, which is a great thing, and they did it on a good level. But the history of an instrument is not how you play the staccato, but it's the music you play with.
Right.
And there was a big lack in the French school of bringing music into it. Sigurd Roscher did it. He, from the beginning, he was interested in music, not in saxophone as this, you know. And I think now we are at a moment where different people do things, and it becomes more diverse, and that's what makes it finally it will survive, I think.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
But many things we do when I am in saxophone camps or things, I think if a normal audience would hear this, what would they think?
It's a great question.
It sounds like a freak show sometimes, like not the quality of playing, but the music. I mean, completely not from today, but it's also not, you know, ripe in itself, like Mozart or any other old style that is kind of forever, you know.
Right.
Certain musics just don't survive, and they shouldn't maybe be played so often. I don't know. It's it's difficult.
But thank you so much for your time, Marcus.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We're off to the next thing at the camp.
Yeah, we have to talk actually.
Okay. Yeah, more talking.
Yeah. So now my mouth is